All right, so it's already 6:35 p.m. where we stand in Barcelona. We're gonna go ahead. Hopefully, you guys are ready to hear from one specific talk. It's not a talk. It's not a presentation. We're gonna have today more of an interview, a fireside chat with two people that are very important persons in the quantum computing world, and they're going to introduce us their company, what they have been doing lately. Because last week they released something very interesting and that I believe it will be before and after in the quantum computing industry. And it's also a little bit switching gears. So we've gone deep into the technology in previous events of Quantum Barcelona. Now we can talk a different mix or bridge between business, the applications, and of course the quantum technology. So today I'm really happy to have here with us Strangeworks, one of the coolest startups in the quantum computing world. We have William Whurley from CEO and founder. Hello, Whurley.
Hello, how are you?
So Whurley is not only the CEO and founder of Strangeworks, he has the curriculum is just very big. You might know him from the book that I myself had to use in order to get into this field. It was Quantum Computing for Days that he co-wrote with Chris Zaret.
Yes, that's correct.
And he's also a serial entrepreneur that has exited a couple of his previous endeavors, and comes to the quantum computing industry with a lot of entrepreneurship experience. And we also have Dr. Cesar Rodriguez, who's the Chief Scientist Officer of Strangeworks. Hello, Cesar.
Hi, I'm here.
So Cesar speaks good Spanish because he's from Puerto Rico. If any of you prefer to ask something in Spanish, he will probably be able to answer. Even though he today lives in Germany, still I guess he remembers his Spanish. So Cesar has a PhD in physics from the University of Texas in Austin, engineering, and has been everywhere. Both in the academic world and working, of course, in this field, from Oxford University, MIT, ETH, Zurich, Tokyo, you name it. So Cesar's CV that doesn't fit in this screen. And both Whurley and Cesar are leading together with their team and Strangeworks. There's a startup that I was mentioning before. So. Thank you very much for being here with us. The fact that we're doing online means that we can get people from Germany and Austin at the same time. So that's pretty awesome. Let me start with probably the most important question. How are you guys surviving in Texas in the last week?
It's awesome. It's been a challenge. I mean, for those who don't know, it snowed very heavily here, which is not something we usually get. I was actually in Houston, which is near the coast, so it never snows there. And I got snowed in Houston. So, climate change, totally not a thing. But it's been a lot. There's billions of dollars worth of damage, and it's
Okay, fantastic. Sorry about that, guys. This is we work in quantum computing, but we cannot properly stream some video online. So this is the realities of life. Sorry about that. Would I please go ahead? What is
no worries. You were asking, so Strangeworks, we're a quantum software company here in Austin, and we make probably the tool most people know or should know is quantumcomputing.com, which is a free tool that allows you to go and work with programs, run them on simulators that we host. It supports a whole manner of things, pretty much everything from Qiskit to Q-Sharp to Project Q to BlueCat. They're all on there. And then we have an enterprise product, Strangeworks CQ, that we sell to governments and enterprises. It's a bigger, more bolder version of that product. So it's got team management and cost and credit tracking and can interface with their existing HPC infrastructures and things of that nature. So that's a high level view. And how we got started was, honestly, we believe that all of you should have the access to these quantum computing technologies. And I originally started this as a Linux Foundation project. And I got a bunch of the quantum companies together, and they didn't really want to work together at the time. So I said, great, I'll just go start a company and do it myself, and was lucky enough to meet Cesar. And he, of course, brought a lot of experience. He's been doing this for 20 plus years, and also a lot of vision to where we want to go. So I brought him on as a chief science officer to work with me to kind of set the vision for the company and go do it. And Cesar, maybe you can talk a little bit about your thoughts on that and where we're at and where we're going.
Yeah. So a little, as Sergio mentioned, I was an engineer before I became a quantum physicist. This was about 20 years ago, when it was because I wanted to program quantum computers. And all of my engineering professors, they thought I was completely nuts, completely crazy. And here I am, like, really a common friend introduced me to Whurley, and now it's like, now let's do this, let's make it happen. And for me, what was very exciting about joining Strangeworks was that I consider myself a physicist. I'm a quantum physicist. This is what I've done, like, my career about. But since I was the engineer, I have a lot of respect for, like, how hard it is to build good software. And and this is all, of course, like in physics, engineering, there's a lot of overlap and friendly rivalries and all that. So physicists always say, well, I could code, I can do code too. And of course, it's very different to do code for scientific than for production code. These are completely different things. And the joke only I can make, because I'm both engineer and physicist, is that the physicists, whenever they first learn the Newton's laws and all that, they go, aha, I could build a bridge if I wanted to. And of course, no, I don't want to use that bridge, right? Like, you don't want to use the bridge of somebody does it just to prove a point. I would rather use the bridge based on dozens of years of engineering principles back to Roman times. And I feel the same about software. And the focus on Strangeworks is really that. It's doing all this software engineering that's essential to unleashing quantum technology.
I think that's a super interesting point, and I'm gonna hold that thought, because one of the things I do want to touch today is this intersection or joint work between physicists, mathematicians, if you will, and software engineers. And how do we get all that together? And it seems from the outside that that's something Strangeworks really has been able to harness, that power on the two worlds that are interlinked or entangled, if you will. So now this was the Strangeworks until last week, right? Building that domain, creating that community. There has been a lot of noise since certain press releases went out during this weather thing in Austin. But we've been hearing a lot of things. So this company that suddenly has released the platform. What can you guys tell us about it?
Well, I think, let me talk about the approach, and I'd like Cesar to talk about what you can do on the platform as either quantum enthusiast or quantum physicist. From a business standpoint, think about it this way. What we've tried to create is kind of the Switzerland of quantum. So you don't if you're a hardware provider, you don't have to worry about going to one of the big guys who may or may not want to work, cheaper prices or commoditize hardware. If you're a software provider, there's an open environment to put all your examples in. Just a really, really great place for everybody to join. But more importantly, we want to be able to give enterprise customers some value. And so that's why we partnered with a whole host of people. So if you remember when AWS Bracket launched, it launched with kind of smaller scale. Nothing wrong with that. Microsoft had done the same. We came out a little bigger. So we have partners from everybody from 1qubit and Algorithmic to Amazon Bracket and Microsoft, both being partners with us as well. And Atom Computing, Bleximo, Blue Cat, D-Wave, Entropic Labs, Hitachi, Honeywell, Horizon, IBM. The list goes on, and it's on our website. It's 21 partners. And this week we've added 5 more that we'll be announcing in a second set of partners. It'll probably be 10 to 15. So it's really about bringing everybody together. Right now, everybody's fighting over this piece of pie, right? This quantum pie. And the fact is we're all in the kitchen and we have flour on our faces and the kitchen's on fire and the sprinklers are on and there's no pie to fight over. We're a long way from having an industry. And so we wanted to give the community resources it needed, at the same time start really bringing the enterprise into the quantum realm. And Cesar, maybe you could talk a little bit about the product vision and what people can do with what we announced and what we released.
Yes. So Strangeworks QC for quantum computing. called quantumcomputing.com. Literally just go there right now, join, play with some code. There on the browser without any installation, you can find in all the major platforms like Qiskit, Circ, Penny-Lane, Spaghetti Chorus, V-Sharp, D-Wave, Project Q, all those things, all those familiar names, Handsome, all that, and you can run right there the code without any installation. It just works. But more importantly, it's not just a tool for coding. It's a tool for sharing. So there you can make public links and share them online, put them on Twitter. And why is this important? Is because right now all these software platforms, as they exist right now, they're changing incredibly fast. If you go to some of them, like you will say, like on the first page, we will break compatibility. This is like a real issue now. And if you try to run some examples, you will immediately find that they don't work in some of the platforms. The examples on the same thing very often. And we think this is a barrier for the industry to get started. So by providing an easy way to share the code with people to do it, this is the way we can nurture this collaboration, have entry points for many people. Maybe you can have the physicist that writes the physics code, but then it's in production, then it's open source, somebody else can come and add value so it scales better, things like this. It's really the kind of collaboration that we're talking about. And of course, there's a lot of enthusiasts that are coming just because quantum is cool and they want to try it. And we provide an easy entry point. Otherwise, the barriers are quite high to know where to get started. And often people don't know where to start. A lot of people ask me, just tell me which one is the best platform, and I'll just start there. And the truth is, there's no best platform yet because there's no full platform. We don't have a full software stack. There's a lot of different things. And this is evolving. So what we're all doing is following the evolution, keeping up, evaluating technology, and finding what's missing, what the community can do. And what we hope is that, very much like machine learning, data science, and a lot of these things, that the libraries came from scientists that are open. We think quantum computing will be the same. So what we're trying to do is just lower the barriers, do all the engineering so people can go do some quantum coding.
Thank you for that. So one thing, I'm getting feedback from the team that your mic is a little bit low. Not sure if you can increase it a little bit, Cesar, on your side. So that's much better. That's much better. So that sounds pretty interesting, because until now, what you would have to do, either as an independent researcher or a quantum computing enthusiast or a company trying to dig into it, was kind of get yourself the agreement with each of the providers, or use their free tiers, and then adapt your algorithms, your circuits to that specific computer, to that specific machine, to those qubits that are set up in that specific way. From what you say, it looks like you're trying to abstract all that from the complexities and all the possible hardware providers. Is that right?
No. Well, yeah.
Sorry, I put mute to be courteous and I forgot it was on. So it's not just about the hardware providers. Think about where we're at in the evolution of quantum and what's needed. There's so many software frameworks to experiment with. And so what are you going to do as a developer? You're going to go and download every single one and sit down. Like, you can come to quantumcomputing.com on that side and have a library of projects already in those frameworks that you can just take, clone, and start playing with. And all those frameworks are supported moving forward. So IBM updates Qiskit, you don't have to redo anything. Your project just works, right? So there's kind of that side of the community. And on the enterprise side, yes, how are you going to go and do a contract with every single hardware provider? They're very expensive, et cetera, et cetera. For our enterprise customers, we've actually negotiated with the providers to lower the initial price that they come into. Now, we don't tell hardware providers how much to charge for their machines, any of that. But instead of taking $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, maybe they can do it for much, much less. And how that money is spent on that machine, that's up to the provider. But we want to lower the barriers to entry across the board. So if you're an individual software developer, you sign up instantly, you have time to value. You have all the frameworks, you have all the simulators, everything's running, right? And you get a good return on the investment of your time. If you're an enterprise, we can be the one source that you can go to that can help get negotiated the contracts, that can do the other stuff if you need with these hardware providers, because people also don't know what to use. They might want to switch between different resources, or maybe they decide that annealers are better than gate models, or gate models are better than whatever. this is the flexibility we want to provide. No one knows what we need or which one of these architectures or which one of these frameworks is going to be dominant in the future. So you have to be able to play with all of them freely and openly and build your skills and your team skills and the value that you can provide.
Awesome. Just one thing here for everyone who's watching us on YouTube. Feel free to ask questions live and drop your questions. This is a fireside set, so you can take the mic anytime you want and ask questions to both Whurley and Cesar. And just feel free to put it there, and Carmen, Alberto, the team will help us relay in those questions. So let me, Whurley and Cesar, let me ask you the hard question that I'm sure you have heard 100 times over, which is, so until now, we had two types of companies, right? We had the hardware providers. You can build your startup with a lot of money and start building qubits, or you had the consulting companies. You would take advantage of such qubits, the little noisy qubits, and try to build toy models or experiments and try to sell that to big companies. And then there's the third type of companies that is like Strangeworks, right? Building platform, building ecosystem. So the big question is, isn't it a bit early for that? You muted.
I know, I did it again twice. So no, I don't think, and I'd love to have Cesar chime in on this because he has been in this industry for 20 years. So do you think it's too early from a market development standpoint? You could argue that, but I don't think so, because you can't just take a software developer and say, boom, now you're developing quantum software, right? Right now it's a team sport. You need a subject matter expert, maybe a mathematician, the things Cesar was saying, collaborating with his team. And two, there's not a quantum workforce. And so if we're going to have a quantum industry, there has to be a workforce, and we need to get started on that right now today. So we think what we're doing makes perfect sense because we already have universities and companies and collaborators who are starting to train that workforce. And so for right now, for those people, simulation is probably enough, right, as the hardware develops. So I think the timing is perfect, frankly. Cesar, you're the one who's been in this for 20 plus years. When we first met, we were talking about it. It blew my mind that so long ago Cesar dedicated his career to this. I felt very lucky to run into him. But I mean, what are your thoughts on the market timing as far as that development?
No, I agree with Will on the idea that one has to be the workforce, but also the reason something about how Sergio characterized the industry, that is the hardware, that it's nowhere. It's going to take some time before it's scalable, and then you have the consultants. But however, there are a lot of companies that are positioning themselves to building software products, and a software product isn't just like the end user thing. Like my mom's phone will use a quantum computer. This is like, we're still far from that. But just like in normal hardware, one has to build compilers, one has to build management systems for the hardware itself. One has to build transpilers, one has to build a low-level software. And there's many companies positioning themselves on this area. And of course, on top of that, there's programming languages, there's way to optimize this. However, it's very difficult to do this from scratch, and everybody's focusing on small parts of this stack. And however, one part alone is completely useless. So what we think is that by providing one place where everybody can bring all those pieces together, people can start building the stack, figuring out what are the missing pieces. Maybe they can stitch them together. Maybe there's a startup opportunity for some of those. But it's really our vision really is that it is early, but there's a lot of groundwork that has to be done, and this is the right time for that. So what are the engineering problems that we can solve so other people can have successful solutions for that? And the community aspect is very important because we do not think that this is going to be decided by one company or one enterprise that's a customer, this is going to be decided by developers. That's ultimately the compiler that works, the one that everybody uses, that's what it's going to be. And so we want to help the people that are working on those tools by having a community that uses the tool and give them feedback and make it easier for them to get more things so they can mature these products better. It's a little bit like in the early days of computing. Back then, it was very difficult to get access to hardware. It was very difficult to program them, all that. So things evolve very, very slowly. So yes, the hardware is still like at the vacuum tube stage, but we have the internet. We can provide a lot of tools to give it access to more developers, and then this will help us develop many of those solutions. This is not just thinking about the end result. It's really building a whole industry. It's like how can we support that at Strangeworks?
Do you see analogies with how the AI ML industry has evolved? Of course, with the degree of magnitude of the quantum, the actual quantum hardware versus the many machines that you need to have in a cloud environment in order to train a model. But in a way, you typically had your data scientist who would create his Jupyter notebook, and then at some point you need to put that into production somehow inside a pipeline. Is it somehow aligned with what you're saying and what you're trying to create?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of proofs of concept, of course, one can do in a simple Jupyter notebook and so on. But you cannot control hardware by stapling Jupyter notebooks. Like, it's just too slow. There's a lot of other things that have to be done, and we're gonna move from the type of work that's being now. That's like a proof of concept. Look, we run an algorithm that solves a problem, maybe not so well, to people actually starting to tweak to get faster things, to squeeze more out of the hardware. This is where we're going now. All the hardware providers have made big announcements towards that. So there's a lot of opportunities for building tools for that, and also for people to build solutions on that. So it's not just from like, I solved some optimization problem with a quantum computer. Is, can I do better than before? Can I explore different hardwares? Which one is better for this problem? How can I take the existing code that I have and get a little more out of it? And this is when it starts to become practical. And I think everybody's roadmap is aligned for that right now.
How do you guys cope with the hype? So every week there's something new. Just this morning, I think we heard about one of these big hardware providers maybe going public. Did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about, there's two things. So IonQ said that there's rumors in Bloomberg IonQ is doing a SPAC, which is a special purpose acquisition company. So it's a way of getting into the public markets and potentially raising a lot of money. But it could be a very dangerous path for an entrepreneur, because usually when you go into the public markets, you need revenues, you have quarterly reports that you have to do, on earnings, things like that. And as we all know, quantum is very, very far away from that. So that's an interesting play. What that tells me is that the management at IonQ thinks that their hardware or the quantum market are gonna probably really come in the next 24 to 36 months. And that's because when you do a SPAC, then you're able to have what's called they call it experimentation, evaluation, whatever. There's a period of time that you get to go and try to build the business that you've kind of promised to the market. And so, if IonQ does this, then that's a pretty good indicator that they, at least, and some of the public retail investors, think that quantum's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years, because they would have to have that happen in order for that to not end up being a giant bankruptcy, right? There's also a tweet that came out from a company today that said they're inviting everyone to talk to them about raising a SPAC. That's not quite how a SPAC works. So when you do a SPAC, there's only one company acquired. So you could have a bunch of startups on the backside get together, and those startups could all merge and then go into a SPAC. Like, that's what they're proposing. It's possible. But I think that's a path fraught with danger. We have a lot of issues in the quantum community with funding and access to funding, but also with how we're using and managing it. VC money is not a research grant. Like, they expect something back for that, a lot back for that. And so I think we need to really be aware of kind of the market dynamics. But the hype, you mentioned, look, hype is a good thing to a certain extent. It's not hype I worry about, it's expectations. And people always say hype, but what they mean is expectations, right? So in other words, if it's hyped, quantum's going to change the world, that's great for all of us. That doesn't hurt anybody. If it's hyped, and it's not hype, it's expectation, quantum's going to cure cancer in the next 10 years, that's really dangerous for everybody, right? So it's really a matter of, the hype doesn't bother me. Are they misleading users or the market in the hype. That's where I have a problem with, is the expectations and the truthfulness of it. We can all be excited about quantum computing. We wouldn't be on this event right now with Quantum Barcelona if we weren't, right? But being excited about it and hyping it up, and then having this kind of expectation mismatch to that hype, that's going to cause a quantum winter. We're already seeing valuations be suppressed in some of the hardware companies. This has been very public. So we're already seeing kind of the negative effects of that hype cycle.
Yeah. So one of the unique things of the Strangeworks that's unique to only a few quantum companies out there is that typically you would have a extremely smart scientist, researcher who has the great idea or has been researching something that's a spin-off from his or her academic group, and then they build their company. Or they get together with someone with funding, and then they build it on the private sector. But in many cases out there, they typically have no experience building companies before. Exactly as you said before, raising VC money is not the same as getting a grant. However, on your side, you have been an entrepreneur you've been in a few reviews already. What would you say is better question? What is the knowledge transfer that you can bring from your previous startups, and what is really different from your previous experiences? Do it again.
I keep doing that. It's completely different because, I found myself in the position of leading a company who's writing software for computers that arguably don't exist, right? Really what we have right now is really good equipment for exploring the quantum landscape. But there's a lot of stuff that transfers over. All of the fundamentals of the business, all of the, what I like to call the physics of the business, right? Like the decisions you make when you're starting affect everything. Think about it like building a skyscraper. The deeper you dig, the wider the platform is, et cetera, the higher you can build. So unfortunately, I see a lot of the quantum startup community has already limited where it can go just based on the type of funding or who the funding's from or all of those kind of things. There's a method to that. So that's all useful. But the main thing that I think I can bring is when an entrepreneurial team, and startups are a team sport. It's not about me and my experience. It's not about Cesar. Justin and David, my co-founders, extremely important, two, again, very different backgrounds. When you look at it, the team, what we're bringing as seasoned entrepreneurs is an understanding of how to get from vision to actual, the rubber meets the road, so to speak, right? There's a business, there's money, it's rolling. But the most important thing we can do is when investors see scientists getting into this, it makes sense. It's their opportunity. When they see other companies, it makes sense. But when investors see a group of seasoned entrepreneurs looking at an area like quantum, building a company now, releasing the stuff we're doing, it brings a little credibility to the space that people who aren't quantum people, who are just startup people, see a short-term or shorter-term path to this being an industry. And I think we've been able to help. We've helped several companies with getting their funding. We've talked to more investors for other people than we have for ourselves, which we probably need to work on. But that's what it's about. A rising tide floats all boats, and you need those physicists. That's Cesar for me. You need also the people that are the operational people. You need the entrepreneurial people. This ecosystem needs this, and I think what being a serial entrepreneur brings is some credibility in the eyes of some investors that probably think it's way too early. And if we can get them involved and we can set expectations right, because it's all about that, and we can execute, then I think quantum, can really take off. Like I said, I think a lot of people think the next 36 months is going to be, make it or break it for quantum as an industry.
I think it isn't really difficult in a classical startup where you mix really smart engineers, developers, and entrepreneurs, and the type of pace that startups need. With a quantum company, with a quantum startup, it has to be 10 times more difficult. So how do you guys, deal with the relationship between engineers, entrepreneurs, and having all those visions together. You put it in a really nice way. But how are the tacticalities of creating that relationship in a remote way on top of that?
It's got an auto mute thing on this headset. It's not working out well, is it? So the remote, look, Cesar's in Dusseldorf. One of our best engineers, Dylan, that Cesar and I love, who's also a mathematician, also very much closer to quantum side, he's in Minneapolis, right? We're already about half the team in Austin, half the team distributed, is what it's going to end up looking like. There are talents everywhere. You don't have it like in Silicon Valley. You're building a software company, there's all the talent. If you're building a quantum company, you're going to have to go global, and you're going to have a remote team. Sure, that presents some difficulties. It's pretty easy for us, actually. It's always hard when you're starting off, but I think the challenge is the nomenclature between all those stakeholders is very different, right? Things that Cesar would do that he would take a long time to work on in a research environment, we on the software side, and me especially as more of a hacker, would be like, this weekend we put it together and it kind of works good enough, right? And then you take, Steve Gibson, our chief strategy officer, comes from an aerospace background, has been with us at a couple of startups. He's very process oriented, right? So you have all these different personalities and things. I think that is what's a testament to why I believe we'll be successful. At the end of the day, the company is just the people that work here. And fortunately, I've been very lucky to find a group of very diverse talent located all over the world who doesn't have a lot of the issues you see with remote teams or different attitudes. Everybody listens. And I think that's a talent the team has that I really appreciate. Cesar just doesn't assume he knows more about physics than all of us, blank. He works with Justin, he works with Steve, he works with everybody, and vice versa. So I think that's, the thing that's going on. Has it been difficult? I mean, honestly, not as much as I anticipated. I thought when we first talked about hiring Cesar in Germany to be our chief science officer, like the position for all of quantum at Strangeworks, and I'm going to put him way away from the team. I had a lot of nightmares about it, and he's been amazing, and the team's amazing. And you always have growing pains at a startup, and I tell people startups are always in one or two phases, right? They're struggling or they're out of business. And so if you're at a startup in quantum and you're struggling, you should be very thankful, because that's the reality. But you also spoke earlier about the experience. There's that experience is valuable, but likely irrelevant. Meaning that when we sold our company to Accenture, we sold the gaming company to Zynga, we sold the company to Goldman Sachs, we learned a lot, but that may or may not be applicable in this exact environment. So I think the great thing about quantum is we're all starting at ground zero. The physicists now have competition from non-physicists. The entrepreneurs now have competition from non-entrepreneurs. The software developers now have a whole world of people that may or may not be the quantum developers in the future. So that's what's so exciting about the space. And I think all of those talents, all that diversity, that's super, super important in a company.
It's amazing because the mix of the engineer and the physicist, and I had a quote prepared for this very moment. I was waiting for you guys to wait on this because I would really much like to hear Cesar's opinion on this as well, on the entrepreneur and the physicist. So it was Einstein who said, I was originally supposed to become an engineer, but the thought of having to spend my creative energy on things that make practical everyday life even more refined with a loathsome capital gain as the goal was unbearable to me. Which I think it summarizes in a great way the two worlds of seeking the truth, which is an incredibly great goal in life, and seeking the resolution of business problems or life problems with applicability. And that, and when we work together, different groups of people, of computer scientists, entrepreneurs, and whatnot, the physicists or the scientists will search for the truth and what works and what can be proven. Whereas the entrepreneurs, such as you or myself, is like, yeah, let's hack it out during the weekend and make it work and see if we can build an MVP out of that. So how do you guys bridge that gap on the mindset itself?
I think there's more commonalities than you think. One of the fathers of quantum mechanics was Paul Dirac, and he's one of my favorite physicists. Most people don't know this, but he started as an engineer, and he invented bracket notation. You know, the way we write everything. And he was very transparent that this was based on projective engineering diagrams, basically. Like he was very clear that in his head this was all connected. And he was a brilliant mathematician, but he approached things like very engineering like. And most people would not know just because of like his effort and so on. So I think in some way, quantum was always destined to be engineering at some point, from the beginnings. Of course, like a lot of people are interested in quantum mechanics because of the foundations of the big philosophical questions, right? But there's a lot of other people that are like, this is gonna be the biggest revolution in computing since computing. Like this is not exaggeration, because if you bring Aristotle to now, and you explain him how a computer works, he's like, oh yeah, I get the logic and the machine does it, I get it, but he will not understand quantum computing, right? This is going to be very shocking for Aristotle. So I think it's a big. We know that this is going to happen. We know that this is not just hype in the sense that we have very concrete proofs of the big impact in which problems, how is it going to be, how it's going to change how we think about science and discovery using quantum computers. So what are the engineering steps to get there? Like I think most people in quantum, they're very driven by let's make it happen. Let's make this new quantum revolution happen. This is really what they want to do. Like they want to get there. Many physicists in quantum, they will say, no, I want to make sure I can build the thing that we need. That's really a big focus. And as Strangeworks, of course, like we are very focused on engineering, but it is really the engineering to support the science. That's really like the angle that we're taking, is what are all the things that we need to do so the scientists can take their discoveries and their quantum code into production, into making it mature.
We have the first question from the public, so I'm gonna go ahead and read it. Okay, so the question is from Elenator. She has asked, what's behind the opening of the new branch in Germany? Do you see Germany developing as a quantum hub in Europe?
So Cesar, you should speak on this too, but yes, we do see Germany. We're already working with customers and groups in Germany and in the EU. Germany made the most sense. We'll be opening other places around the world, probably Asian X, but also in the Europe area, Netherlands, areas like that. It made the most sense for a lot of reasons. One of which is when you open an office in a foreign country and you pick somewhere to work as an EU, you have to open the bank account in that country and stuff. And with COVID and stuff, I can't fly right now or go do any of that. And Cesar lives in Germany, so that was part of it. Cesar, maybe you could talk though a little bit about what we see in the environment and things with the quantum developing in Germany.
Yeah. So in general, of course, like there's a lot of geopolitics happening in quantum. A lot of countries are doing their many efforts, and in Europe is investing a lot in quantum. And inside Europe, many countries are doing big investment, and one of them is Germany. But of course, there's France, there's Switzerland. There's many places that at the federal level they have said this is a major policy goal, that we want to be an important place in this new industry. We want to be part of the core of it. And so one of our plans is like we want to help that. We want to help with all those things. We want to help Germany grow in this direction, and all of Europe as well. A lot of our partners and friends are all in Europe also. So we see that there's a lot of potential. And since as Strangeworks, we're really focusing on this rapid pace of things. What are the tools that people need to accelerate that? When you see a new place opening up with a lot of new options, there's a lot of opportunity to help them in those places.
Awesome. So kind of mix with that and all the conversations we've been having about your product, and very related to, I would say about half of our public probably comes from computer science. People like me who really get their mind blown from talking about quantum mechanics. Would you say that today, with the Strangeworks tools or with other tools, can you get into the field without needing a PhD in physics?
Yeah, look, you can get into any field without having, some prerequisite degree. Today in quantum computing, having that physics knowledge is pretty important to understanding how to program them. The thing I said in 2018 when we started the company is, even back in the original days of computers, you had to be an electrical engineer to program a computer because you had to understand the flow of electricity between the gates. We're in a similar spot right now. So can you get started? Yes. Are you going to be like the next quantum wonderkind? Like, probably not. Maybe. Who knows? I mean, the great thing about it is that this technology is going to follow the same kind of evolutionary path as von Neumann architectures, but it's going to happen so much faster that the abstraction layers will happen faster, the barriers to entries. I believe as this gets out, there'll be more of an opportunity. So it's not a chance of you get started today without a PhD, do you have a career? You know, probably not. Maybe you get a job somewhere. I don't know. It depends on your engineering background. As Cesar said, his favorite physicist, much like Cesar, who's my favorite physicist, started as an engineer. That's part of the reason Cesar and I have a common language. You know, you talk about the team getting together with these diverse things. At the heart, everybody at Strangeworks is an engineer. Even our ops guys are engineers, and that's kind of a common language as we all understand that. But yeah, you could absolutely get started and start learning and working and break into it. What you do with that, it all depends, you know, on where you're coming in and your skills. But, you know, having that PhD is certainly not going to help you. Having that physics knowledge is definitely going to be an advantage in the way it is right now. I mean, Cesar, what are your thoughts on new people without the physics background getting into this area?
Yeah, I think they're essential. I think there should be more, in the sense that, of course, like to program a quantum computer, one has to understand a lot of physics, but there's a lot of stuff to support that has to happen. And without that, there's no industry whatsoever. There's no products being built. So I would say, of course, you have to be very curious and you have to be very open-minded and be willing to learn some things. But I think it is essential that we have a mix of people from different backgrounds that understand how to take something, create a product, what's the market for it, what are the needs of users, all this stuff. These are just the standard startup issues, and with that comes, of course, a variety of expertise. So I think many people should join, and they should be clear that this identify from their strengths what is like they can add to it and help out with the understanding this is a super exciting industry. So there's always more stuff to learn, of course. But I think it's essential. We have a very diverse team with like a lot of engineers, designers, everything. And it's, I would say, really like the magic happens when everything comes together. Everybody doing something. That's really when the cool stuff happens.
What would be the book each of you would recommend to someone entering in the field? And please do not say Quantum Computing for Babies, neither Nielsen and Chuang's. Come on with something different.
I say that for a book, I'll leave that to Cesar. For me as a developer, it's like quantumcomputing.com and GitHub and all the places where you can go and experiment and get code. It's not a book. It's actually the resources and the coding resources. Cesar probably much more. I mean, greatest quantum book. The only other quantum book I could recommend out of that is fictional books anyway. They're irrelevant to the industry. Cesar, do you have any book recommendations?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, everybody calls Nielsen and Schwab, we call it Mike and Ike. So everybody always recommends that, and there's a reason. Like it is old, and it is still the best one. It's still the best one. Those first chapters are wonderful. Of course, a lot has happened, and now there's many books online. This is something that's been changing, and I think for quantum, this is extremely useful. Like Qiskit has an excellent textbook with a lot of code and so on, so you can really combine the math with the programming, and I think that's going to make sense more and more as things go. To learn the mathematics behind quantum computing. If you're interested in that, I would say Shankar, Shankar. They has 2 books, one in quantum, one in math, that is fantastic. Prerequisites, very short, very engineering focused. And of course, like if you're like me that likes history, Paul Dirac's book from the 1920s is still lovely. It's just beautiful book. So it feels like it was written yesterday. I love it. So I will always recommend Dirac's. Yeah.
Awesome, fantastic. Can you dare with some predictions for the industry? What would you expect, or what would you like to see in the 5, 10, and 15 years? Sorry for pulling your leg like that.
I think 5 years, I'd like to see us get some actual proof points, right? I mean, quantum computing, as a developer, I still sort of don't see these as computers, right? I see them as really amazing lab equipment that one day will lead to the development of a computer. So something that's practical, something that anybody, whether vertical industry, maybe it's pharmaceuticals or chemistry or material science, something that we say, okay, now this works, this is it, this is what you can use it for. That's going to help more than anything, because we're still searching around for that, right? And depending on who you talk to, the timelines are all off. So I'd like to see us come to some consensus on a timeline. As a startup entrepreneur and an investor, I wear two hats. And on the investor side, I say, Cesar, when will it be? And he says 3 years. And Sergio, when will it be? And you say 20 years, and these, we need to come up with some reasonable timelines. So 5 years, see some consolidation around what we think will happen, see some proof points. Past 10 years, I mean, look, this is going to lead to more than just quantum computing. There's quantum sensors, there's quantum internet communications, right? I think quantum mechanics as a whole is going to be, to the 2020s, what the railroads and the industrial revolution was in the 1920s. I really think that. So past 10 years, I'd like to see all of those things happen. And I predict that, while a quantum internet is probably still 20, 25, 30 years off, a lot of the other things, sensors work today, a lot of the quantum computing stuff, you can do a lot of stuff today. I think that you'll see that turn into an actual industry, and you'll see much like the web in the early 90s, you had this web developer pop out of nowhere. I remember I was working at IBM, and one of the CEOs said, what's a web developer? Is that an engineer? And I think you'll have that same kind of thing happen, because as people need it, they'll hire for it. It'll present an opportunity for people to get jobs that pay better. That whole kind of industrial revolution thing, that's what I see happening in the next, 10, 15 years. Cesar?
Yeah. So in terms of hardware, of course, hardware is a big factor. Is that we don't nobody has cracked how to make hardware scalable. So that's why it's so hard to make predictions. Once you make it scalable, once you have the transistor, then you can come up with Moore's law. We don't have that yet. Many companies are working on different angles for that, but not only scalability, but also some other companies are thinking of more short-term goals they can have, which is build very single-purpose processors and so on. And I think in the next few years, we're gonna see some of those becoming useful for some very, very simple tasks. Maybe not universal, but there will be more and more proof of concepts like this. And this is the right path forward. This makes a lot of sense, to bridge. And on top of that, there's gonna be a lot of progress on the software tools, given the existing hardware that we have, and how to optimize for it, and how to experiment for some things. So I think the news are only going to accelerate, and it's going to be a wild ride from here on.
Hey, Sergio, we do have one more question from the YouTube chat. So since we have 5 minutes, maybe we should read it now.
Go ahead.
So Adrian asks, he says, first, there exists classical but quantum-inspired algorithms pushing the frontiers classical computation, such as tensor networks. Do you think that there is a relevant competition between Q and Q is inspired?
I think it's a healthy, positive competition. They help each other out in many. Some of those examples are good ones. That they're not going to be separate. They're going to help each other out. That Strangeworks example, we when you talk about quantum, we use the broadest scope possible. We like quantum-inspired algorithms. We're perfectly happy with single things, because this is really what it needs to happen for now to get where we want to go. And people want to experiment and play with all these different hardwares, all these different simulators, all those things. So I think this is going to be part of the path going forward. And I don't see it as competition in a bad way. I see it as sort of reinforcing each other, challenging each other. And finally, doing things like that is what forces people to ask very good questions. Because when you can come up with a classical way to do something really well, and then it makes you ask, so what was the quantum for? Maybe it's better for another problem, things like that. So these are the things that really sort of sharpen our understanding of what are the capabilities of the quantum computer.
So can you play with quantum-inspired algorithms in Strangeworks in your platform, or are you focusing mainly on pure quantum circuits?
So you'll be able to do all of, so remember our platform is container-based, not cloud-based. And so we can take advantage of private HPC, Amazon, whatever. So any classical stuff you want to do, you can do right in line on the platform. So you could run just classical stuff if you wanted and not even touch a quantum thing, or do a combination, VQE, things like that. So there's plenty of stuff you can do on it. I also agree. I think, look, the reality is in the future, it won't just be quantum or amorphic or neuromorphic or whatever. You'll be using some combination for think of your computational problem. Somewhere in there will be a thing that's better for quantum, or maybe it's better for amorphic, or whatever the case may be. And so in the future, the way computing will work is you'll be using all of these resources through an interface. We call it exotic computing, where you're using all these different various things to do certain parts of a larger problem faster to get to an overall answer. So I think quantum inspired has just as much of a place as quantum or any of these other technologies. And it's great to see that people are taking an inspiration from quantum and implementing it on devices we have today to make things faster and better in computation in general.
Awesome. Who would you say are or can become your competitors? Because at the moment it's like, well, there's nobody really doing the same thing as Strangeworks or in a similar way. Who could become your sort of competitors?
Well, that's interesting to say. I have a view on competition as a startup founder, which is when you go to sell something. So I come to sell to Sergio and you buy from Cesar. Cesar is now my competition. And right now that's not happening in quantum. There are no enterprises just waiting to spend billions of dollars on this stuff. So I don't think we're in a phase of competition. I think it's all about collaboration. And also, I don't think eventually for Strangeworks, for our business plan, that we ever have a true competitor. I mean, think about it. AWS Bracket looks and does some of the things we do, and there's overlap between them. So does Microsoft. They're both partners of ours. So you can actually do Bracket through quantumcomputing.com, right? So we're in a different position with a different strategy. So there'll be overlap, and there'll be small areas where we compete with a QCware, Zapata, or Microsoft, or an IBM, or whoever, but then there'll be these big areas where they don't do any of the stuff we do, right? And that's why we work together. And we're really trying to make this a lot more about collaboration and competition. Look, eventually, it'll be bloodthirsty capitalism. I'm sure all the quantum physicists will be like, this is our chance to be the next Elon Musk or something. But for now, it just doesn't make any sense. And ongoing, we're building a spanning layer and infrastructure, as Cesar has talked about, that is extremely complex and hard to build and very boring and not the cool, sexy thing, right? So I think we're safe until somebody decides they want to do a whole lot of, pardon my language, shit work. When somebody's like, man, that sounds exciting, then we'll probably have a competitor. But we've already had 3 or 4 people who are partners who set out to do what we're doing and got a year, 2 years into it and realized, it's a nightmare, because especially there's no standardization among these hardware providers. There's no, so it's much harder. So I think that we're good on competition. And I also think we don't want to be competitive. It's okay if you start a company, anyone on this call, and you do something I do and somebody picks you for it over me and I do these other things. In the deals we're not seeing anybody buy from one group. We're seeing people say, take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little. So I think there's a lot more room for partnership and collaboration. And eventually, sure, I'm sure it turns into competition, but we are so far from that. It's almost insane to think that there are people in our community who are like, we're gonna get them, or like, look out, or it's like it's kind of a ridiculous discussion.
Well, for me, one of the takeaways from this session was your analogy of the kitchen that you gave at the beginning of the interview, where everything is kind of half on fire and we're trying to make a cake all together, right? So we are almost running out of time, but we have one last question. Carmen, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, sure. Okay, so last question for today. Do you think it is the right time to present use cases to clients, perhaps for architects or more business-related positions?
I think people are doing this, of course. Like a lot of consulting companies are doing this. I think what right now, of course, the main limiting factor is access to hardware, because you need to commit to big pieces of hardware. So only big enterprises they can afford to be forward-looking, like thinking big strategic terms. Those are the ones that have the money to invest. They are interested in business cases, and they see it as a way, how do I stay up to date with this technology? So I would say yes, it is right. I don't think it makes any sense to say, yes, well, I'll give you a business case now that it's going to save you $500,000 tomorrow. That's not going to happen. But in terms of the strategic analysis that enterprises have to do, this is what they want. This is very, very essential. And many companies, we welcome people coming up with clever use cases, using the algorithms and coming up with their own new ones and so on. If they want to put them in quantumcomputing.com to showcase them, by all means, you own your code, go brag about it and get some clients.
Yeah, and if there's anybody who has projects on there, you can submit them to be considered for the actual public library from the console, and we're taking content. This is not about us, this is about you. We've done our work to build this platform. Now it's about you going, experimenting, collaborating, sharing around. That's what we want to see happen. I think that drives the industry faster, more than anything else, is just getting people that exposure and that access.
Well, I think that is probably the perfect wrap up. This has been a great talk. Awesome to get to know a bit about you guys a bit more, what you have been building all this time. I encourage all of you to go over to quantumcomputing.com, see what's in there, and participate in the ecosystem. We have some nice takeaways, some collaboration on making cakes on a kitchen on fire, and the future of quantum computing and how far and not far we are at the same time. So really good to see companies that are not just hardware, not just consulting, but also providing this ecosystem around. So thank you very much, Whurley. Thank you very much, Cesar, for your time today. Awesome to have you in Quantum Barcelona. I wish I could have you at some point in Barcelona so we could have a beer together. So the invitation is out there.
That would be great. I would love that.
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
In a post-pandemic time, we'll make it happen. And in the meantime, everyone stay tuned because we have a few more events lined up. We're going to post the schedule very soon with some nice new elements for our agenda for everyone in Barcelona and outside in our quantum computing world and beyond. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and see you next time.